Record.
Well, we're back.
Yes, we are.
We're here with some more content, golden material for our listener.
I would give this a 10-star rating for myself.
The topic?
It's just fun.
Yeah, it's like a hobby, studying case studies of high control groups and like comparing stuff and everything. So we decided on this topic because we looked at the bite model in our last episode, and I kept referring to a certain book and a certain group and things like that. So we're like, let's just bring it full circle and talk about that.
And I'm over here with my like cancer diagnosis lifestyle, and I'm like, I could just read this entire book and then talk about it on a podcast.
Yeah.
So I did.
This is the life.
I was so sick this week, and I was like, well, at least I can read that book and it'll be entertaining.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jennifer took notes. I do not have notes because I listened to the audiobook as I was driving places. So, yeah, not to say that it didn't leave an impression, I will say. So, yeah. Well, let's get into it. What stuck out to you?
Okay, but you were just about to tell me something. Do you remember?
Yes.
Oh, you have it.
I do remember. Okay, so the book that we're looking at is called Broken Faith, and it is by Mitch, Weiss, and Holbrook Moore. It is about it's about this group called the Word of Faith Fellowship down in North Carolina. So,
that's my notes.
Do you have their address?
I was going to show the book cover.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. It won't let me.
Let's see. Mine's like playing the book out loud right now, so you can look it up.
It was like published maybe 4 years ago, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
It's a little bit.
Like back in 2018 or something?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, here it is. Here's the book cover.
Yay.
Yep. There we go. So, I was telling Jennifer that I'm also reading this book called Combating Cult Mind Control by Stephen Hassan.
Hassan.
I've been pronouncing it even more wrong than that this whole time. But anyways, I've been reading that book too. And he's the creator of the bite model. That was making me think about the Word of Faith Fellowship so many times as we were taking the quiz. So he has all this material out there talking about like how people end up in cults and, how to help people exit them and stuff like that. So something interesting that he points out in that book is that a lot of these groups end up like filing a bunch of lawsuits against people that speak out against them. And like at the end of our last chapter or our last episode, I was saying how I was intimidated and like I didn't want to say which group I was talking about my personal life. I didn't want to put their name out there, or I didn't want to like say the exact time frame of when I was in there, just in case someone were to like investigate that or something. And I think groups are so effective in continuing to intimidate people after the fact. And so it a lot of the times like still controls people in so many ways. So Stephen in his book, he was saying that like sometimes he's gotten clients that are acting like they need help or like acting like they want to leave the group and, they're wanting like an intervention or, some sort of support to get out, but they're actually plants. Like they are kind of like actors that the group puts out there, like to trick the therapist or like, to trick the people that are working for these organizations and stuff like that. Cause I'm like, it would be great to have like a facility that like, people who are leaving these groups can come to and like you help them get their social security number and you help them get their documents and like you help them learn life skills and, how to exit stuff and become an adult and like be independent, help you. It's just like, I don't know. I'm like, that would be so cool to create like a facility.
Okay. Quick interjection. Yeah. They have that. They mention Wellspring several times in the book.
In Ohio?
Yeah.
I don't think it exists anymore.
I Googled it. I don't think so either.
Yeah. So and I was like, okay, they mentioned that place and stuff. It doesn't look like it exists anymore, but you'd have to be doing that work like underground, definitely.
It's tricky because
Yeah.
these groups are like mafia-like.
Yeah.
They're
So,
scary. Yeah.
like, as a therapist, you start to wonder, okay, are any of my clients like,
Getting in
coming
your
in
head.
with some of these like ulterior motives or like,
Yeah.
trying to catch someone like saying stuff or, in an ethical situation or, no one wants litigation to be brought up against them. Like, no one wants a lawsuit. No one wants anything like that. So, like, I'm not part of any of these high control groups. I don't have contact with any of them. Yet at the same time, they're so effective to where like therapists or, other professionals or, people that run these facilities and stuff can be intimidated to like not do the work to help people. Like that's how effective these groups are. You
Yeah.
can't even name the groups and you're like skeptical of people. It makes you kind of be like, oh yeah, there's too much risk involved to engage in a certain type of work, and like that's just amazing to me, the reach and the influence of fear that
Yeah.
these groups have, like even to educated people that don't have anything to do with them. Like I can't even name most of the groups. But
This
yeah.
group too, sorry to keep interrupting you. Like this group particularly seems like they have had the highest success rate at evading lawsuits that like or criminal charges or like
Mhm.
we followed like Nexium or Scientology or like other organizations that have had prosecution and that eventually at least there's some sort of guilty verdict, and this group has evaded it every single time, even to the point that like they're still fully operational, still earning money, like no zero accountability has happened ever, and they have decades of documented abuses.
Yeah. And like they brought up all of these lawsuits and stuff against CPS.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in their state to keep stuff from
And
happening or like, pulling the religious freedom card and stuff like that to where the
yeah.
government authorities or even like law enforcement doesn't have authority to do stuff.
Well,
Uh,
they're so wealthy and they're supporting a bunch of political campaigns, and so they have basically bought the sheriff in town, the judicial system, even to the point where like I was like researching after people from Broken Faith, Word of Faith, just finished working on Trump's campaign. They
mhm.
were in charge of his VIP sections. Did you
Yeah.
read that?
Yes, they were
This
there.
year?
Yeah.
They're still paying off politicians and like it have a very big seat at the table in some of these circles that are donating to like the literal political climate we're living under right now. It's
Mhm.
so it's like we're not associated with them, but like I feel them. I can feel them right now in my own.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not that far removed from this kind of.
Yeah. There was one group that was mentioned in this book, the Faith Freedom Fund.
Yes.
Yeah, they are they are doing some of that work like in that immediate neighborhood and stuff like that to like help people that are coming out, helping them like secure housing and all kinds of stuff like that. And on there, like you could definitely find their contact information and stuff like that. And like I respect that group so much because they make their contact information so readily available and all of that. But it's like it's so hard to know in like any topic, right? It's so hard to know if someone is pulling the wool over your eyes. Like
Yeah.
you literally can't know. You just have to kind of like follow your structure. Like regarding therapy, like I follow my protocols, and I document in a way to where there is not so much of my involvement involved in therapy nowadays. It's like real evidence based, just like everyone knows what's coming next protocols. So like if someone's trying to trick me, well, you're wasting your time. So, yeah, it's just amazing though, like how they can intimidate anyone into not engaging in like the type of work that they don't want to happen.
And I think this is what gets me with religiously driven groups versus the mafia, or the cartel. Like it's very obvious, or I think it would be much more obvious, to understand like what kind of an industry someone is in or what kind of work they do or where they got their money or what their values are with a group like that. But these groups literally call themselves like, what do you say? Like faith, freedom, like hope, love, promising, transformation. Like it's the biggest like paradox because they come in with this very like pro-social, we're here for justice and social work and all these things, and underneath, and a lot of people fall for that, and underneath they are doing worse harm than some group that is violently breaking the laws, and and it's all covered up. And so there's something about that element of like the cover up that makes it worse to me.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
read true crime or like a murderer and be like, yeah, that's like, it's obvious harm. But this kind of harm has so much of our culture fooled. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that just makes me really frustrated.
Well, okay, so the leader of this church, Jane Whitley, and I'm using the word church loosely again to
It was called,
describe Word of Faith, but Jane Whitley is 80 years old at this point or older, and she plays like the grandma trope, of like,
yes,
oh, they're coming after little of me with these lies, type of thing. None of that's true. We're just trying to practice our faith and stuff like that. Or like there's a lot of people in that group that they dress super nice. They play those tropes of like, I used to be a school teacher and, I'm a respected citizen. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm this and that. These kids are just lying about us. And so I think they have people fooled. And unfortunately, elected officials are intimidated by them because, like, especially out in that county, the voting pool is so heavy there. Yeah. And the
yeah,
money. Yeah. It's so heavy there that, if an elected official crosses their path in the wrong way or something like that, they'll be taken out of office like right away.
yeah.
So,
Well, or killed. Literally, that
oh
elected
my,
official was murdered.
yes.
She was murdered. So in the book, it says that she was fighting and fighting, and she was telling people. Someone came to her office and told her, "Hey, I've been put out as a hitman to kill you by this organization, and I respect you. You've done a lot for my family through like social work, so I just want to let you know, like, watch your back." So she knows this for several years and is continues to be like, I don't what was she in the system? Like a
Wasn't she like a DSS person? Like she
yeah,
wasn't she a social worker? Nancy something?
I think so. Yeah, she was some no, I think she was like in the lost part of this, or like an elected official.
Okay. Well, I'm not
Either
sure.
way,
Yeah.
they were like targeting her. And right when she said she was starting to tell people like they're coming for me if something happens to me or I die, you need to know that wasn't an accident, and she mysteriously died of the flu.
Yeah.
Like
It was like a respiratory distress or
it was
something like that.
poison, dude. For
And
sure.
it said like no autopsy was performed and stuff like that, and her family was like, insisting and stuff. But I'm like, why was no autopsy performed? Like even if you had to go to a different county or something like that, like it just that's a mess.
I know.
Yeah.
So they're in power.
That
Ugh.
reminds me
That guard.
of like the stuff in Rajneeshpuram, the Wild Wild Country documentary. Yeah. Like out in Oregon, how they ended up like poisoning the local salad bar and stuff like that. And like the whole town got super sick and everything. It's like, it's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It really is crushing my rainbow girl part. My
Huh.
rainbow bright girl part, who's like, people are good. People are looking out for you. Like the best will work out. It ain't working out.
Okay, well, we need to make a parenthesis for your rainbow girl, your rainbow bright girl part, because during your cancer treatment, we need her. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, I've just shared this, like, since we're just going to have a convo today, it's like a podcast or recording. I almost shared this Britt Hartley video several times where she just has explored like how terrifyingly awful and painful and horrible life can be sometimes, and like in the face of people who are just naive about like the world's great, no problems here. She's like, it can, she really like lays into how she'll push back on people with like proving to them how terrible suffering can be in life and like what is the point of that. But then when a nihilist comes at her with, and like, why are we even alive, then she pushes back with like, but look at the sky, look at the clouds or the trees or like the highest of beauty. And the point of the whole thing was like, It's like dialectics. Both are true. These are bad people that get away with terrible things, and people literally are dying. And also, there's like some beautiful things about life to stay alive for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
That's where we're at.
it's that nuance in, I'm just going to say Stephen Hassan. I don't think I'm
Let's do.
pronouncing it
That's how I
correctly.
say it.
Okay. Well, I think it's wrong how we're saying
I
it.
say it Hassan. Okay, go ahead.
Hassan. Anyways, um, something that he says in his book is like, there's like nuance of, groups can exist without them being super detrimental to people, or without them being like super high control or something like that. So like being with that dialectic of like, people can like legit be excited about their group and it have a leadership structure and it still be healthy and okay and like not high control. That's something that for me as a survivor, I think has taken years, and like I'm still not there to like entertain that dialectic. Like it takes so long when you've had a bad experience in like an organized religion or an organized organization. It takes so long to be able to like warm up to the idea that hierarchical structures can exist and it be functional, and it not be manipulative or high control or something like that. And I was like, well, good for you for pointing out that nuance, like, but, in my experience, he has, I like mentioned last time, he has CrossFit on the list. My experience with CrossFit has not been a high control one.
Nice.
Yeah, I see some stuff where it's kind of like organizational, or it has like some fad type of like trends and, group dynamics and stuff like that. But, I am like happily and individually involved, and no one's crossing over into my personal life and all that. So am I just defending the high control group that I'm in? I don't think so. But
no, this is my client notes. Ding, ding, ding. Elisa, client is experimenting with low control group structures to explore the nuance of harm versus benefit in a group structure.
yes, it's all
Client is tolerating experiment rather well and getting very physically fit.
It's all exposure therapy at this point.
It is.
Yeah.
That's so true.
It's all good.
Being alive is exposure therapy.
Yeah. But where I will not be involved is in my daughter's elementary school PTA. That that gets to be a little bit hairy. So
I'm even finding high control dynamics in cancer circles.
oh my gosh.
There's this one clinic everybody's claiming is like has the best cure. And the way that people are talking about it, the rhetoric to me feels a little bit like cognitive bias. Like someone has led them to believe it. And I'm like, that feels a little culty, guys. So
yeah. Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Yeah. And like once you're aware of it, you see it. I always tell people it's like if you buy Adidas, then you start noticing everyone else with Adidas,
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Can I tell you one of my first takeaways of this book?
Yes.
Okay. Did you watch the Remnant DVD, or did you watch the DVD? Did you watch the Way Down series that was
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm going to recommend more cult stuff to you because you might need a break, but the playbook of the Remnant and this church are very similar, like very similar. Both have women, first of all, women pastors, which is pretty uncommon in like an evangelical or Pentecostal space, I think. Mm-hmm. They are both of the women are very into their image. So once the money starts coming in, like all of these shopping sprees and how they present themselves and all the like, everybody in the churches is meant to dress really like fancy. The spanking, like the abuse of children parallels, the marriage stuff parallels, where like the head leader is telling people who to marry, and breaking up marriages and sending kids to live with other kids. Like all of it is the same as the Remnant, which was really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like that type of thing where they're like restructuring families, or you need permission to like start a family and stuff like that. Permission to have sex was one of those things. Yes. Like, they would tell you what you had to do on your married night or wedding night or whatever, and like nothing else. Those types of things. It's like, that amount of control in an area that's so important, like family or like bonding with your child and stuff like that. And then they like give your kid to another family and stuff. It's like when you're talking about it, it sounds like how does it get to that point? But it's all a gradual thing, or sometimes it's like threats too. Like if you don't do it, they'll do it anyways. Or, just like really sad, really sad stories about the families that got torn apart and then people ended up like in a worse state than before. Like lots of addiction coming out of the Word of Faith group. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really
That
sad.
was an interesting point towards the very end where the author was saying, like, when they get to these, because all these lawsuits that have happened, and to a jury, the person who was harmed is presenting their truth or whatever, but they've like struggled with drugs and alcohol or addiction and not how to go to because they don't know how to make it in the world and they have all this trauma. So like they don't look as polished. They're talking like they know the history and they can like the prosecution can like really tear down their credibility because of all of that. And then the people from the church come in and they're like polished. They're they look like they're very sharp. They're lawyers. And so like it's frustrating that survivors are not being believed because of that dynamic when again, just like you were saying, like the wool is over people's eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah. And then there's people with like open CPS or DSS cases against them and stuff like that. And so like they don't really, they don't have as much credibility in front of their peers as these people that are like, no, this person is delusional or something like that, with like some sort of polished vocabulary. And yeah. And then someone in the book was like, I think it was Rick Cooper. He told Jane Whitley, like, you made my wife perjure herself, like in court, like under threat, basically. And Jane Whitley was like, well, that's her problem that she did that. But like, had she said the truth, what could have happened? Like her family could have been torn apart and stuff like that. Like it's just like the amount of control, it takes away all of your freedom and it ends up with like long-term consequences and stuff. It's just really sad.
It's a very sad situation. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that like the prison thing that they made in the basement or whatever, all of that stuff was not locked. They've got people locked up in those like facilities, quote locked, but like they're coming and going. They can leave. They could on paper leave at any time, except that they can't because it's like a psychological prison.
That's human trafficking.
It's like human trafficking. Oh, this church has tons of human trafficking.
Yes. Well, yeah, the international stuff and all of that. A lot of people think that human trafficking is like moving someone from one place to another, like drug trafficking or something like that. I think the word trafficking is a little bit misleading in that sense, but like human trafficking is when you like, it could be like closing someone in somewhere. It could be taking them different places. But a lot of times what happens is that like someone ends up like stuck in one place or like they're not allowed to leave their home unless they do X, Y, or Z, or they're kind of like, forced to work in a situation, So you see that in Nexium where they locked Daniela up. You see that in Scientology where they have like the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah. This is all human trafficking. And it's like keeping people in kind of like this citizen oriented prison, Yeah. And then I think of the Stanford Prison Experiment, which I find super relevant to like our psychology today and stuff like that. Like you're giving people this like, I want to say relatively small amount of power, but like in their circle, it's a really big amount of power. And like the harm that humans can inflict on others, like looking at like the severity of the beatings that happened in the lower building, stuff like that. Like this is a Broken Faith reference, parenthetical citation, insert here. But the severity of the beatings that happened and stuff like that, it's like, all those people were victims of human trafficking and like severe psychological abuse. And it's still happening nowadays.
Okay. I think that it's interesting the degree. I'm curious too in the age of the iPhone versus before the iPhone, because a lot of I mean, some of these things happened post iPhone, but a lot of them didn't. And so people, like one guy in the beginning of the book was the reporter, or no, the guy working for the Christian organization that was anti like cults. And all he had was like a backpack with a video camera, like stuck in there with like a little hole. And he
Yes.
got footage and gave it to Inside Edition, which I watched. Did you watch it, by the way?
No, I
Oh,
didn't check it
sorry, I did all my homework this time. I watched the whole Inside Edition report. It was fascinating. But you know, that was like a lot of work to get video footage, and now everyone has a cell phone in their pocket, and it's pretty easy to record and not know. We all have listening devices, so I wonder if that doesn't curb a little bit of this, um, or at least like give more evidence, because you know, if you can catch it on video, then that's the data that
out. Yeah.
people.
I thought like the use of technology being controlled was really interesting. Like when Viber started coming out and stuff like that. Like I used to use Viber like because of like international calling and stuff like that. Like it just became so much more accessible instead of like buying Skype credit or like buying phone credit and stuff like that. Like you could call over Wi-Fi, you know, or like WhatsApp, stuff like that. Like when those apps started coming out, it was like a game changer if you had family overseas or things like that. But they started controlling like who could have the app and like what you could do with it and like inspecting people's phones and like all of this stuff. Yeah. Um, so I just wonder like nowadays, yeah, that's a good question. I wonder what it looks like. Um, I saw that, well, I watched a couple of the YouTube videos of like the Word of Faith Fellowship, like that they put out.
Okay.
They're like radio broadcasts and stuff like that. And they're like, this is the true story about like, you know, insert character from the book here or whatever. And they'll like discredit things that they say by using footage from when they were like super indoctrinated in that setting, you know, and I'm like, you can't, you know, you can't say, oh, we have this footage from when they were here. And so that discredits what they're saying now, you know, because they're no longer controlled. Like that was a polished, it was like a brainwashed message that they were saying back then. And so, you know, trying to discredit anything that someone says, like, you know, it's a logical fallacy. Like you can't just be like, oh, nothing they say nowadays is true because look, this is what they said back then. They were a completely different person back then, you know? Yeah.
Even like Matthew, was it Matthew who like he did the whole lawsuit and gave all of the interviews, pushed it so far, and then they texted him his dad was sick and he went back to the organization, and then they basically kidnapped him, re-brainwashed him, and made him recant everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it Matthew Lowry? That I think that was his name. Yeah. And so they have videos of him too, of like you know, his real story, what actually happened and stuff like that.
No.
Ugh. And then there was Matthew Fenner. Yeah. That
I did not write that in my notes because I forget names.
oh
There
his
was
last name
Matthew, yes.
his last name was Fenner for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he ended up getting people prosecuted because he was beaten. It was basically a conversion therapy type of situation.
Oh, yes, that one,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then they were able to classify it as a hate crime, but like all of the insisting, you know, and then it going back and forth, like, you know, the sheriff would kick the ball to the prosecutor and then they kick the ball back and stuff like that. And then at the end of the day, they found out a police report was never made, even though they said one was and stuff like that. Like
Corruption all the way up.
yeah, it's so deceiving. But I was like, man, the amount of like trauma exposure, just like having to go back there and then like getting followed in cars and like all this stuff.
No.
Like I was like, what a brave person for going back there and for insisting and like becoming informed about the law and stuff like that to be able to drive the case home. Like it was just I don't know, it just like really showed bravery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My like emotional reflection on that is it's just like I want to be like, is this how the world works? And then my answer to myself is like, yes, this is how the world works sometimes. It's not all the time,
Yeah.
but it is sometimes for sure.
Well, it's not all the time, but I'm like, I want my kid to be aware of these dynamics and, you know, to be able to like catch stuff early, and keep the conversation open and stuff like that. Because it's so easy to get involved with an organization. Like when they make you feel special and, when you're not happy with your current life, they give you like this big purpose. And, it's really easy to end up falling into something like that.
Yeah, like we should be adding this onto the parental lessons, like drugs, sex, cult dynamics, like
Peer pressure.
this needs to be a skit.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we have to explain this to our listener out there. Jennifer has Sunday brunch with her family,
Yes.
and there's a different topic every Sunday. And so one time I had the privilege of being there, and we made a skit about peer pressure, and it was good. It could have won some awards in a film festival. The kids were excited to perform. I think that was like the win from it. Some of them were.
I hope they took it to heart. That was fun.
It was great. Okay, so I told you, okay, Jennifer, wait till the last like few pages of the book because there's some bombshells that get dropped. So Matthew Fenner that we were just talking about, his grandfather died of a gunshot wound to the chest. Okay, just like all of a sudden. It was ruled a suicide by that local law enforcement that, I don't know how accurate that is, right? But it was ruled a suicide, but it was just like, these strange death circumstances that surround that group or that surround like a timeline where someone is speaking out and stuff like that. It's like, you can't help but raise your eyebrows,
Yeah.
And then there was that thing about The Rock from Brazil.
I know.
I want to know more.
That was such a tease at the very end. It's like the author couldn't help but not throw in this story. So it started, okay, Jane was talking about remodeling. Of course, this is like how all these cult leaders are. Let's remodel the sanctuary again. Yeah. So she wanted like a giant gemstone thing for her pulpit, right? And then and they have all these contacts in Brazil because they have a church down there that they like a sister church or whatever. And then one of the people in that congregation was like a gemstone miner or something. And they had this access to this really, really good huge emerald. And somehow it ended up in the United States over by the cult. And now it's lost. And the Brazilian government is in a case with them trying to find it.
Yeah, because like that's their national patrimony.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a wild story.
Yeah. And like the role that like an actual licensed lawyer had in kind of like deceiving the people, like it was just like really sad to me that guy went in for surgery or something like that. And he's like, will you guys take care of this rock for me? And they're like, yeah, we'll take care of it. He wakes up out of his surgery and stuff like that, and it's like, where's the rock? And it's like in some sort of warehouse that's owned by one of the church members and stuff like that. And then like, okay, cliffhanger. Oh, and that company just got permission to haul like poison basically like in their trucking company. And so, then you bring up Jonestown and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, it's the same substance that was used that all of those people were poisoned with and stuff. It's like, so you never know what can happen. Now they have access to all this poison. I'm like,
yeah. And I'm curious if the congregation is escalating in violence or de-escalating and sort of just like kicking it down the road in 2025. Because they seem to be they've gotten away with everything basically, but they still have like, this is kind of like the continuation of Scientology or other cults. Like at this rate, they have so much money that they have swindled people out of, that even if their attrition is like increasing, is attrition dropping out? I think it is. Mm-hmm. So it seems like at this point it's attrition, but they still have so many funds in the bank that they can sustain off of whoever, like membership for a decade or two until people just fizzle out. Like in Remnant, the leader died. I think there's a small band of people who still meet. There's a small band of Nexium people that still meet even though Rhaenyra's in jail. And it's like, it'll fizzle, but another cult will start, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you get a David Miscavige to come
True.
and snatch the torch,
One of her kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just think
It's a
these
lot.
people, the leaders, especially when it's like a high control group with a charismatic controlling leader like that, I think that they're just criminals, like thieves, basically, who have learned that a quicker way to break in, a quicker way to steal from people is to manipulate them and convince them to give you their money, then hold them up at gunpoint. So they're not strong enough or like scary enough to hold an actual gun up to someone. So they just hold a psychological gun up and they get all these, and they actually make more money than a thief and get away with it for longer than a like classic bank robber. But that's what these people are doing. They're just thieves.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Hold on, let me check my notes.
Okay.
You have anything else?
I had the word rock circled.
Covered rock.
I did look up that organization. They're actually Dallas based. The guy that went in with the camera in his backpack.
Oh,
I thought
yeah.
it was interesting how he got them used to seeing him with a backpack all the time. And like one time it was ruffled through or whatever. And then like he'd keep bringing the backpack around until he put the camera in it, like when it wouldn't be inspected anymore. But that group, I can't remember what it's called right now, but they're based out of Dallas and they just started as like a kind of like a Bible study or something like that, that started like calling out these groups and investigating them and things. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like curious to me what his story was that they would have that level of commitment to go in.
Well,
Like,
it was
how can he
months.
paid for it? Yeah, how can he? Some of it is the journalism, which I know like eventually you have a story to sell, but gosh, it's so much work.
Yeah.
That's also why they get away with it. It's like the perfect crime because the people that are being targeted don't have resources to like fight back.
Yeah.
And so it's like, who's going to care enough to go in there and fight it?
That group, I think it was called like Trinity something.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, the Trinity Foundation. There we go.
Yeah.
Search history. So, yeah, I was tempted. Okay, so, all right. Did you experience, as you're reading this, any temptation to like reach out to anyone or to like, invite someone on our podcast? Or like, did you ever experience any of that? Like looking people up or something?
I mean, I daydreamed like, what would it be like to go drive over? I mean, it's an open building to drive over there and walk in on a Sunday and sit there. Like, what would it feel like a church service? Or do you think you'd be able to tell? Like, I drive by Remnant a lot because it's in Nashville and it's just another building in a line of churches. And then,
Yeah.
like there's this very deep and sordid history with it, with so
Mm.
much abuse.
Yeah.
Did
I was
you?
thinking, I mean, I don't think I have the clothes or the hair to be able to like play the part. They would know that I'm coming in there to like, find something or like similar to how the social workers were treated, they knew that, well, the lady said, I'm not here to worship. I'm here to check on these kids and stuff. And oh my gosh, like numerous times that people went to check on people and they were like drugged acting or something like that. Or like those children, like,
Wow.
why were they so lethargic when the
They were
social
drugging them. Don't you think it's wild how similar the playbooks are? They
Yes.
just copy paste every time.
Yeah. It's like the bite model, like I am so grateful for the bite model because like it gives you language and it validates like, hey, that was not okay. That was like super destructive. And no wonder why years later it's still present in people's minds. Or like no wonder why people that leave these groups, some of them struggle with substance use. They struggle with holding down a job. They struggle with like general adulting. Like they didn't get those skills and stuff like that. And like it's a shame because if they were still in the group, they may be like physically taken care of in other ways and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
like in my opinion, the Word of Faith Fellowship is the picture of the bite model. Like it's really bad in all circumstances. Like filtering the information that people can get, lots of emotional manipulation, abuse, beatings, like
physical and sexual abuse. Yes.
Yeah. Giving people phobias, of like, oh, if you're around these types of people, like you'll catch their evil or like you'll catch their demons and stuff like that. Like,
lots of that.
Yeah. And
they're at the very furthest tip of that spectrum.
I would say, yeah.
On destructive cults.
Yeah. I'm like, hopefully there aren't worse ones, like.
Well, FLDS is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
I can give you a few. Hold on.
Right. I'm like Rainbow Bright. Like,
I know.
That has to be the extreme of it. Like, that has to be the worst.
Well, here's the flip side is like, what are the organizations in society that we've created that are safer for seekers who need support, and do they exist?
I don't know.
I think that okay, my answer to that question is yes, sort of. Like, we have neighborhoods and governmental systems, we have schools, we have healthcare systems, we have ways people can group together, bowling leagues and
nonprofits.
All of that is intended to do the same, because the target person is a vulnerable seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And there are places for vulnerable seekers to go that are not so destructive, and it's just getting them funneled in the right direction.
Yeah.
And maybe like spending some time making those systems better. This is like one of my values, is like creating communities that are safer. Because there's never going to be a safe community. I think if you think you're going to create that, you've already missed the boat, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
All communities have risk.
Yeah, I think it's hard because like I've become so skeptical of like anything that's organized, basically, that I'm always like on the lookout, for something to go awry, or, and unfortunately, when you have like a history, quote unquote, it's like you become a little bit like hypersensitive to like any sort of like little red flag, Yeah. So yeah, I think like, can change come from within? Yes. But do I trust myself to like get back involved? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Ooh, you're thinking of like, do you trust yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Like to see it or to get out when it's not safe?
Yeah, since I became like, what did I put on the bite model? Like a core member or like, core devotee or something like that. Like, since I have maybe a personality type, or I don't know now about nowadays, but like, since I had a personality type where I was just kind of like gung-ho into submission to a group, and granted, I'm not in my late teens anymore, early 20s. Or did it happen in my 30s? We can't be so sure. I'm not as young as I once was. So, is it possible, like, for me to, like, incite change somewhere and, like, inspire them to be a safer place? Or, I think what happens more often than that is that I, like, shirk away because it feels too familiar and it's, like, cringy, So, yeah. Like, here, I'll give you an example. I volunteer at a homeless shelter. And at the homeless shelter, in order for the people, like, we call them the outside guests. They're the people that are, like, on the street that come in. In order for them to get their food, they have to sit through a chapel service, okay? I do not go to the chapel service. I have no idea what they're preaching. I have a feeling it's kind of, like, nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, just because of some things. But I'm like, okay, is that better than nothing? Like, I don't think it's right to like make people sit through something like that in order for them to eat, but if that shelter didn't exist, I don't know how those people would get food otherwise, So I'm like, yeah, there's a trade-off, like, I mean, a lot of those people, they'd have to go to a different city, because that's like the only homeless shelter that serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't want to like completely tear it down, but like, if I volunteer enough, will someone lend an ear for me to be like, that's kind of manipulative to like make people sit through your guys' stuff? Or like, in order for people to like apply for housing and like all these benefits through them, um, they like make them sign up for a discipleship program basically.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
yeah, you have to like work the program like in order to become an inside guest, like the people that can live in their dorms and stuff like that. So I'm like, the organization is existing and doing good things, but do I find it to be a little bit like triggering or like a little bit on that side that like I'm not a fan of, you know?
Why can't we just have like more secular programming
Right.
that like gives people their basic needs, their Maslow's hierarchy, and helps them without it having to be in exchange for this dogma?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because like, what if that organization was Scientology? That's what Scientology does too. They like have these things, and it's like, we will help you with your problem if you subscribe to our ideology. It could be Scientology, it could be Islam, it could be evangelical Christianity, it could be Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, it's always the same stipulation. It's just change out what the doctrines are.
Yeah. Or some of those weird like rehab facilities that like slap people into sobriety and stuff like that. Like you hear about all these things and it's like, and I think in the bite model it mentions like any means to the end are valid or something like that. And it's just like, I don't know, that makes me reflect, you know. So I don't know.
Messy world.
It is. Yep. Do you have a client after this?
No, do you?
No.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're not like having to like go straight into therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm dying to tell you about spiral dynamics.
You will be teaching me because like I don't know what that is. So
I'm making a lesson for you next time.
Okay, that'll be our next episode.
But, yeah, I'll be the teacher.
I'll be the student.
Okay.
Like and subscribe.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, great. Well, we didn't solve anything. This was
about it.
Yep, we talked about it. We opened the doors for some conversation. But yeah, it's rough.
Listen, that's all we're advertising over here.
Oh my gosh.
You know what you're getting into. It is rough. Sending much love to everyone who's been affected by high control. To all the listeners.
Yeah, signing off.
The high control dynamics, and we're with you in it. And also, we're going to keep trying.
That's all you can do.
That's all you can do. Tell it to Rainbow Bright. Okay, signing off.
Bye.